In the quiet heat of rural Georgia, a gang of white supremacists set their sights on a 35-year-old black woman's farm, convinced she's just another stubborn landowner they can scare off. Bo Strickland and his iron fangs see only weathered hands and dirt-stained boots, never suspecting the steel beneath. To them, Tanya Briggs is a lone farmer with no real defense. What they don't know is that Ghost Eye once reigned as the Marine Corps' deadliest sniper. When threats turn to arson and kidnapping, Tanya's war isn't on foreign soil. It's coming home. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Tanya's vegetable fields, painting the Georgia countryside in warm amber hues. Her muscles ached from a full day's work as she lifted another crate of fresh produce into the bed of her weathered pickup truck. Sweat trickled down her neck, and her work gloves were stained with rich soil. "Tanya, come on in and get cleaned up for supper." Darlene's voice carried from the farmhouse porch, where the screen door creaked in the gentle breeze. "Just one more crate, Mama," Tanya called back, wiping her brow with her forearm. The familiar chorus of cicadas filled the air, a constant backdrop to life on the farm that had been in her family for generations. The rumble came first, a distant growl that didn't belong among the peaceful evening sounds. Tanya's body tensed instinctively, her years of military training kicking in before her conscious mind could process the threat. 3 mud-splattered pickup trucks appeared on the horizon, their engines snarling as they barreled down her dirt road. Dust billowed in their wake as they skidded to a stop, forming a barrier across her driveway. The lead truck's Confederate flag decal caught the setting sun, its colors garish against the dirty white paint. Tanya's jaw clenched, but she held her ground, straightening her spine as car doors creaked open. Bo Strickland emerged from the center truck, like a snake uncoiling. His red-burned skin gleamed with sweat, and his tank top stretched tight across his beer belly. A stream of brown tobacco juice leaked from the corner of his mouth as he sized up her property with calculating eyes. 2 more men flanked him, younger, leaner, but with the same mean look in their eyes. They spread out slightly, a practiced move meant to appear casual while actually boxing her in. Tanya recognized the tactic, had used similar formations herself in different circumstances, different lands. "Pretty little spread you got here," Bo drawled, his voice dripping with false sweetness. He took a few steps forward, boots crunching on the gravel. "Shame it's gonna be someone else's soon." The shorter of his 2 lieutenants, a wiry man with a patchy beard, hawked and spat a glob of saliva that landed inches from Tanya's work boots. "Ain't right, this much land in black hands," he muttered, just loud enough to make sure she heard. The other man, wearing a sleeveless shirt that revealed crude prison tattoos, reached into one of Tanya's crates. His thick fingers closed around a ripe tomato, and with deliberate slowness, he crushed it. Red juice and seeds dripped between his fingers, spattering the dusty ground like blood. Tanya felt her pulse quicken, but kept her voice steady and firm. "Get off my land." The words came out calm, but carried the weight of steel, the same tone she'd used commanding troops in combat zones. Bo's smirk widened as he closed the distance between them. His breath reeked of cheap beer and chewing tobacco as he leaned in, trying to use his bulk to intimidate her. "We're giving you a chance to walk away nice," he said, voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You don't? Things get ugly. You boys better leave right now." Darlene's voice rang out from the porch, sharp and clear despite her age. She stood at the railing, one hand gripping her cane, the other planted firmly on her hip. Bo's head snapped toward the house, and for a moment, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He stared at Darlene and Tanya felt her muscles coil, ready to move if he took one step toward the house. But after a tense moment, Bo jerked his chin at his men. They piled back into their trucks with practiced efficiency. Engines roared to life, and tires spun in the loose dirt, deliberately spraying grit and pebbles across Tanya's boots and pants. The trucks peeled out in a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes, their departure as aggressive as their arrival. As the dust settled and the last truck disappeared around the bend, Tanya's eyes fell on something new attached to her fence. A crude sign had been nailed to the wooden post. The letters "Get Out" scrawled in dripping red paint. Below it, someone had spray-painted a Confederate flag, the paint still fresh enough that it glistened in the dying light. The next evening settled over the Briggs farm like a heavy blanket. Tanya and Darlene sat at their worn kitchen table, the familiar routine of dinner providing a fragile sense of normalcy after yesterday's confrontation. Steam rose from bowls of okra soup, and cornbread cooled on a plate between them. "You barely touched your food," Darlene observed, watching her daughter push vegetables around her bowl. Tanya managed a weak smile. "Just thinking, Mama." She'd spent the day checking and double-checking the property's boundaries, her military instincts on high alert. Every distant engine sound had made her pause in her work, every shadow drawing her attention. "Those men don't scare me," Darlene said firmly, reaching across to pat Tanya's hand. "Your daddy and I dealt with worse in our time. We're still here." The sharp crack of splintering wood cut through the quiet evening like a gunshot. Both women froze. Then came the roar, a deep, hungry sound that shouldn't exist in their peaceful kitchen. Orange light suddenly flooded through the windows, painting twisted shadows on the walls. "The barn!" Tanya bolted from her chair, nearly knocking it over. She burst through the screen door, Darlene following as quickly as her aging legs would allow. Heat slammed into Tanya's face as she rounded the corner of the house. Flames climbed the wooden walls of the barn, consuming decades of family history in minutes. The fire cast a hellish glow across the yard, and thick black smoke billowed into the darkening sky. The crackle and pop of burning wood mixed with the terrified sounds of animals inside. "The horses!" Darlene cried out, clutching her chest. Tanya sprinted toward the barn doors, her military training taking over. The heat was intense, but she managed to throw open the heavy doors. Smoke poured out, making her eyes water and her lungs burn. She could hear the panicked whinnying of their 2 horses inside. "Here!" she called, coughing through the smoke. The horses burst out past her, their eyes wild with fear, heading for the safety of the far pasture. Tanya staggered back from the inferno, gasping for clean air. As she stumbled away from the barn, something caught her eye on the white siding of their house. Fresh paint gleamed in the firelight, crude letters spelling out "Not welcome here" in angry black strokes. "I'm calling the sheriff," Darlene said, her voice shaking with anger more than fear. She disappeared inside while Tanya grabbed the garden hose, knowing it was futile but unable to stand by and do nothing. Neighbors' porch lights clicked on in the distance. A few cars slowed as they passed, but no one stopped to help. Tanya could see their silhouettes watching from their properties, but they remained silent witnesses to the destruction. Sheriff Alan Huxley's patrol car rolled up nearly an hour later, taking his time like he was responding to a noise complaint instead of arson. The barn was mostly ash by then, still smoldering in places. The sheriff stepped out, adjusting his belt with deliberate slowness. "Well now," he drawled, surveying the scene with practiced indifference. "Looks like you had yourself a fire." "This wasn't an accident," Tanya said, fighting to keep her voice level. "Look at the graffiti. The same people who threatened us yesterday did this." Huxley barely glanced at the spray-painted message. "Could have been kids playing pranks. You know how they get this time of year." "Kids?" Tanya's hands balled into fists. "Sheriff, That barn was doused in accelerant. You can smell it from here. This was planned, organized. The Iron Fangs— Now, hold on there. Huxley cut her off, his voice taking on an edge. That's a mighty serious accusation without any proof. You got witnesses? Security cameras? Anything besides your suspicions? You know exactly who did this, Darlene spoke up from the porch, her voice carrying the weight of decades of similar injustices. The sheriff turned to her with a condescending smile. Mrs. Briggs, I understand you're upset, but we can't just go around accusing people without evidence. I'll file a report, but— He shrugged, leaving the implication clear. Nothing would come of it. That barn's been standing since my grandfather's time, Darlene said, each word sharp with dignity and anger. You telling me it just happened to catch fire the day after we get threatened? Coincidences happen, Huxley replied smoothly. He pulled out a small notepad, made a show of writing something down. I'll look into it, but don't get your hopes up. These things are hard to prove. Tanya watched him, her combat-trained eyes noting every detail of his practiced performance. The way he avoided direct eye contact, how he positioned himself to keep the graffiti out of his line of sight, his careful choice of words. This was a man who had played this role many times before. The sheriff finished his theatrical note-taking and tucked the pad away. You all have insurance? That's not the point, Tanya said through gritted teeth. Well, that's about all I can do for now. Huxley tipped his hat with mock politeness. You ladies have a good evening. He retreated to his patrol car and drove away, leaving them with the smoking ruins of their barn and the knowledge that no help would come from official channels. Tanya stood in the yard, staring at the blackened skeleton of the barn. Her fists were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white, and rage burned in her chest hotter than the fire had burned. Behind her, the spray-painted threat seemed to glow in the last embers of the fire. A clear message that this was only the beginning. Dawn crept over the Briggs farm, revealing the true extent of last night's destruction. The morning air still carried the acrid smell of burnt wood and smoke. Tanya had been up since first light, methodically clearing charred beams and twisted metal from where the barn had stood. Each piece she moved felt like lifting a piece of her family's history. She paused to wipe sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of soot across her skin. The physical labor helped channel her anger, gave her something to focus on besides the rage that had kept her awake most of the night. The rhythmic sound of her work, lift, carry, stack, almost made her miss the approaching footsteps. Wouldn't have expected anything less from Ghost Eye, a gruff voice called out. Already at it before the dews dried. Tanya straightened, turning to face Frank Mullins. The elderly veteran stood at the edge of the debris field, leaning on his cane. His weathered face was creased with concern as he surveyed the damage. "Morning, Frank," Tanya said, dropping another chunk of charred wood onto the pile. "And I haven't heard that name in a long time." Frank limped closer, shaking his head at the destruction. "Heard the commotion last night. Would have come over, but these old legs don't move like they used to." He paused, looking directly at her. "Sheriff, do anything useful?" Tanya's jaw tightened. "About what you'd expect. Figured as much." Frank lowered himself onto an overturned feed bucket, his joints creaking. "You know, if those boys knew who they were messing with, they might think twice about playing with fire." "That life's behind me," Tanya said firmly, but her hand unconsciously touched the small scar near her collarbone, a reminder of her last mission. "Is it?" Frank's eyes, still sharp despite his age, studied her. "Because the woman I read about in those classified reports my old army buddies showed me, the one they called Ghost Eye, she wouldn't let thugs run her off her land." Tanya stopped working, memories flooding back. The weight of her rifle, the perfect stillness required for impossible shots, The lives she'd taken with surgical precision. 3 years as the Marine Corps' top sniper, with 27 confirmed high-value target eliminations, until that final mission in Afghanistan, when her commanding officer's betrayal had left 2 team members dead and ended her military career. "That's not who I am anymore," she said quietly. "I came back here to take care of Mama, to farm this land like Daddy did, not to fight wars." Frank snorted. "Way I see it, war came to you. These aren't just regular criminals, Tanya. They're organized, connected. They've done this before to other families." "I know what they are," Tanya replied, her voice hard, "but I can't just—" She trailed off, remembering the oath she'd made to herself after leaving the service. No more violence, no more death. She'd seen enough of both. "Can't just what? Defend yourself?" Frank leaned forward on his cane. "Your skills, your training. They're tools, nothing more. It's how you use them that matters. These men, they're counting on people being too scared to fight back." Tanya resumed clearing debris, but her movements were less focused now. "You don't understand, Frank. What happened over there? What I did? I understand better than most," he interrupted. 30 years in the army, remember? I've seen good soldiers broken by bad leaders. But you were different. Ghost Eye wasn't just the best shot in the Corps. She was smart, strategic. She protected people. "And I failed," Tanya said quietly. "My team trusted me, and they died because I trusted the wrong person." Frank pushed himself up with a grunt. "So that's it? You let these lowlifes win because you're afraid of your own shadow?" He gestured at the burnt barn. "Your daddy would have fought." "Don't," Tanya warned, her voice sharp. "Don't use him against me." "I'm not using anything," Frank replied calmly. "I'm reminding you who you are, both sides of you, the farmer and the warrior. Because from where I'm standing, you might need both to survive this." Tanya didn't respond, but her hand stilled on the charred beam she'd been moving. Frank watched her for a moment longer, then turned to leave. "Just remember," he called over his shoulder, "sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to show them you're ready for one." The rest of the day passed in a blur of physical labor. As darkness fell, Tanya finally allowed herself to stop. Her muscles ached, but the barn site was mostly cleared. She stood in the yard, letting the cool evening air soothe her tired body. A movement caught her eye, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, near the fence line. Tanya's combat-trained senses immediately heightened. The figure stood perfectly still, watching. Then, as if sensing her awareness, it melted away into the darkness. Her hand twitched, muscle memory reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Frank's words echoed in her mind as she stared at the spot where the watcher had been. The warrior inside her was stirring, whether she wanted it to or not. The next morning arrived with a heavy mist clinging to the fields. Tanya stepped onto her front porch, shotgun resting comfortably in the crook of her arm. She'd been up since before sunrise, restlessness driving her from bed. The weight of the weapon felt familiar. Not quite like her old sniper rifle, but reassuring all the same. She moved silently across the wet grass, her boots leaving dark impressions. Years of military training kicked in automatically. Scan the terrain, identify changes, look for signs of intrusion. Near the edge of the cornfield, something caught her eye. Fresh boot prints in the mud, too large to be her own. Tanya crouched down, studying the tracks. They were deep. Whoever made them had been carrying something heavy. The pattern led toward her irrigation system. Her jaw clenched as she followed the trail, moving with the silent precision that had once earned her the name Ghost Eye. The morning sun was burning off the mist when she heard it. Metal scraping against metal, followed by quiet cursing. Tanya pressed herself against the corn stalks, inching forward until she had a clear view of the pump house. A young man in a dirty denim jacket was crouched by the main valve, working at something with a wrench. Even from behind, she recognized him as one of the Iron Fangs, the newest member, always trying to prove himself. She'd seen him hanging around Bo's truck during their first confrontation. Tanya emerged from the corn, shotgun leveled. Drop the wrench. The young man jerked, tool clattering to the ground. He spun around, face pale beneath his baseball cap. I was just— Hands where I can see them, Tanya commanded, her voice carrying the same authority it had in combat zones. What's your name? C. Cody, he stammered, raising his trembling hands. Cody Miller. Well, Cody Miller, you're trespassing. She gestured with the shotgun. Turn around slowly. Keep those hands up. He complied, sweat visible on his neck despite the cool morning. Tanya spotted the Iron Fang's tattoo peeking above his collar. Fresh ink, barely healed. A wannabe tough guy sent to do the dirty work. Please, he said, voice cracking. Bull kill me if— Bo's not your problem right now. Tanya pulled a length of rope from her pocket. I am. She bound his hands efficiently, using knots that would hold but not cut off circulation, a skill learned from both farm work and military training. Cody's shoulders shook as she secured him. Sit, she ordered, pushing him gently but firmly to the ground. She pulled out her phone and dialed, keeping the shotgun trained on him. Sheriff, I've got an intruder caught tampering with my irrigation system. Young man, Iron Fang's tattoo. The sheriff's voice came back lazy and unconcerned. That's so? Well, sit tight. I'll be out when I can. It took 45 minutes for the patrol car to roll up the drive, though the station was only 15 minutes away. Sheriff Huxley stepped out, adjusting his belt over his substantial belly. His badge caught the morning sun as he approached, boots crunching on gravel. Well, well, he drawled, taking in the scene. What do we have here? Breaking and entering, vandalism, attempted property damage. Tanya listed off, professional and precise. I caught him trying to sabotage my water supply. The sheriff circled Cody, who kept his head down. That true, boy? No, sir, Cody muttered. Was just looking around. She jumped me for no reason. With a wrench? Tanya challenged. The security camera on my pump house caught everything. She was bluffing. There was no camera. But Cody's face went even paler. Sheriff Huxley chuckled, pulling out a pocket knife. Now, Ms. Briggs, let's not get excited. He cut Cody's bonds with one quick motion. Boy was probably just lost. These country roads all look the same. Lost? Tanya's voice was incredulous. He was deliberately— Tell you what, the sheriff interrupted, helping Cody to his feet with fake concern. I'll give him a stern talking to about trespassing. No need to make this official. This is the second attack on my property in 3 days, Tanya said, anger building. First the barn, now this. Accusations like that are serious business. The sheriff's friendly mask slipped slightly, revealing something cold underneath. Wouldn't want to start throwing around charges without proper evidence. Might make some folks unfriendly. He steered Cody toward the patrol car, calling over his shoulder, You have a nice day now, Ms. Briggs. Try to relax a little. All this stress can't be good for you. Tanya stood rooted to the spot, watching as the sheriff opened the passenger door for Cody, not the back seat where suspects belonged. The young gang member glanced back once, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The patrol car turned slowly, gravel crunching under its tires. Tanya's hand tightened on the shotgun as she watched the taillights disappear down her drive. The message was clear. The law wouldn't help her. If anything, it would help them. Her military training had taught her to analyze situations quickly, to identify threats and allies. Right now, she had a clear picture of both. The anger that had been building since the barn fire crystallized into something harder, sharper, something that felt like determination. 2 days after the incident with Cody, Tanya drove her pickup truck into town, the bed empty where fresh produce should have been. The morning sun beat down on Main Street as she parked outside Johnson's General Store. Her boots hit the cracked sidewalk, and immediately she noticed the change. People who usually waved now turned away, hurrying into shops or across the street. Inside Johnson's, the usual chatter died as she entered. Mrs. Peterson, who'd bought her tomatoes for 20 years, suddenly found the canned goods fascinating. Behind the counter, old Tom Johnson wouldn't meet her eyes. Tanya grabbed a basket and moved through the aisles, her practiced ears catching whispered fragments. Causing trouble. Should just sell. Asking for it. At the meat counter, she overheard 2 women she recognized from church speaking in low voices. Heard her vegetables are full of chemicals, one whispered. Bo Strickland said she's using illegal pesticides, poisoning the soil. My Henry won't buy from her anymore, the other replied. Can't risk getting sick. Tanya's hands clenched around a can of coffee. The lies were spreading like poison through the community, choking off her business as surely as weeds could strangle a crop. She approached the counter with her groceries. Tom Johnson finally looked at her, his weathered face uncomfortable. Cash only, he muttered. Card machine's broken. It wasn't. She'd seen the woman before her use it. But Tanya pulled out her wallet without comment, counting out bills while feeling the weight of stares on her back. The hardware store was worse. She needed parts to repair the irrigation pump Cody had damaged, but Buck Mason blocked the entrance, arms crossed over his massive chest. We're closed, he said flatly. Sign says open, Tanya pointed out. The open sign hung clearly in the window behind him. Closed for you. Buck's voice held no emotion. Don't need your kind of trouble here. Tanya felt her mother's training kick in. Years of being taught to hold her head high in the face of prejudice. She turned without a word and walked back to her truck, ignoring the snickers from a group of men lounging outside the bar across the street. The drive home was tense, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. But nothing prepared her for what she found at the farm. The water tank that supplied her irrigation system loomed above the fields, its metal surface gleaming in the afternoon sun. As she approached, an acrid smell hit her nose. Floating near the top, dozens of small fish lay belly up in the water. Mom! She called out, racing toward the house. Don't use the tap water. Darlene came onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face fell as Tanya explained what she'd found. Lord have mercy, Darlene whispered, sinking into her rocking chair. They're trying to destroy everything your daddy built. I'll call the EPA, Tanya said, already pulling out her phone. This is environmental terrorism. Baby, Darlene's voice was soft but urgent. Maybe it's time to think about leaving. We could sell, move somewhere safer. This is our land, Tanya replied, her voice hard. 4 generations of Briggs have worked this soil. I won't let them drive us out. Your daddy would want us alive more than he'd want us keeping the farm, Darlene argued, tears in her eyes. Before Tanya could respond, the first engine roared in the distance. 3 pickup trucks appeared on the road, driving slowly past their front gate. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood-red behind them. They parked along the road, music blasting from their speakers. As darkness fell, more trucks joined them. The Iron Fangs had come for their nightly show of force. Inside the farmhouse, Tanya and Darlene tried to ignore the shouts and engine revs that punctuated the darkness. Occasional bottles smashed against their fence, followed by drunken laughter. Get out while you can. Tick-tock, ghost eye! Burn it all down. Darlene finally retreated to her bedroom, hands shaking as she took her evening pills. Tanya lay in her own bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while memories of combat zones flickered through her mind. The night sounds were different, but the tension was familiar. The waiting, the knowledge that enemies were out there in the dark. She thought about the fish in the water tank, about the poisoned lies spreading through town, about Buck Mason's cold rejection. The Iron Fangs weren't just trying to drive her out, they were trying to isolate her completely, make her vulnerable, break her spirit. As engines continued to roar outside her window, Tanya's military training took over. Her mind began cataloging resources, identifying weak points, both theirs and her own. She thought about sight lines, about defensive positions, about the equipment she still had stored away. Sleep never came. The trucks stayed until dawn, their headlights sweeping across her walls like searchlights. But in those long hours of darkness, as Tanya lay listening to the threats and jeers, something shifted inside her. The anger that had been building since the barn fire hardened into steel, and plans began to take shape in her mind. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Tanya spread a large county map across her kitchen table. Coffee steamed beside her as she worked, marking locations with careful precision. Her sniper's training showed in every deliberate movement, each notation exact, each detail critical. She'd been up since 4 a.m., after the last Iron Fangs truck finally left. The map was old, purchased years ago when she'd first moved back, but its yellowed surface still showed every back road and trail in the county. Red dots appeared under her pen. The abandoned gas station where gang members loitered, the bar they frequented, the dirt roads they used to avoid police checkpoints. Darlene shuffled into the kitchen, pausing at the sight of the map. "What are you doing, baby?" "Research, Mama," Tanya replied, not looking up. "Go on and rest. I've got work to do." After her mother returned to bed, Tanya pulled out her old military gear from the attic. The ghillie suit still fit, a camouflage sniper's garment designed to blend into vegetation. Her range-finding binoculars and night vision scope had gathered dust but remained functional. By mid-morning, she was positioned in dense brush overlooking the Iron Fang's favorite bar, the Rusty Nail. Her father's old hunting blind provided perfect cover. Through her binoculars, she watched members come and go, noting their routines, their vehicles, their hierarchies. Bo arrived around noon, strutting like a rooster in his snakeskin boots. Tanya recorded everything in a small notebook. Who he talked to, who avoided him, who counted money in the back lot. Years of military surveillance had taught her to spot patterns others might miss. Around 2, she moved positions, using old logging trails to reach another observation point near the abandoned Phillips farm, where several gang members were meeting. Her movement was silent, efficient. The skills that had earned her the nickname Ghost Eye coming back naturally. Through her scope, she read their lips as they argued over territory and profits. One man, she recognized him as Joey Dawson, seemed particularly agitated, jabbing his finger at the others. Tanya smiled grimly. She'd found her first pressure point. Back at home, she made an anonymous call to Joey's girlfriend, suggesting he was skimming money from Bo. Then she called Bo's right-hand man, hinting that Joey was talking to the feds. Small seeds of doubt, planted carefully. That afternoon, she drove to the county seat, 40 minutes away. The local newspaper office was a weathered brick building with peeling paint. Inside, Laura Whitfield sat at a cluttered desk, reading through police reports. "Ms. Whitfield," Tanya said quietly, "I have information about Sheriff Huxley you might find interesting." Laura looked up, instantly alert. Her reputation for exposing corruption was well known. "Have a seat, Ms. Briggs. I've been following your situation." Tanya placed a manila envelope on the desk. Bank records showing deposits to the sheriff's personal account that don't match his salary. Photos of him meeting with known Iron Fangs members. Dates and times when he's ignored criminal complaints. Laura's eyes widened as she flipped through the documents. "How did you get these?" I have skills from my previous career, Tanya said simply. And friends in interesting places. This could be explosive, Laura murmured, already taking notes. But we'll need more. Concrete proof of direct corruption. Give me time, Tanya replied. I'm just getting started. As the sun began to set, Tanya made one final stop. She parked her truck at the edge of Miller's Woods and hiked to high ground, overlooking the Iron Fang's main compound. Through her scope, she watched the chaos unfold. Bo was red-faced, screaming at Joey Dawson in the parking lot. Other members stood around, tension visible in their postures. Joey shouted back, pointing fingers, making accusations. Two men had to step between them when Bo reached for his belt. Tanya adjusted her scope, reading their lips through the gathering dusk. The words snitch and thief flew back and forth. Someone threw a punch. The crowd dissolved into shoving matches and angry clusters. Her whispered rumors had taken root faster than expected. The Iron Fangs were starting to fracture, their trust in each other crumbling. Bo's iron grip on his men was slipping. Through her scope, she saw him grab Joey by the throat, slamming him against a truck. Other members pulled them apart, but the damage was done. The gang was splitting into factions, paranoia spreading like wildfire. Tanya watched until full dark, recording every detail in her notebook. The ghost was back, moving unseen, gathering intelligence, finding weak points. But this wasn't a war zone. This was her home. And she would use every skill she had to defend it. From her hilltop vantage point, she observed as Bo stormed off alone, kicking trash cans and screaming at anyone who approached him. His carefully built kingdom was showing its first cracks, and he knew it. The pressure was only beginning. 3 days after setting her plan in motion, Tanya steered her sputtering tractor down the dusty road toward Miguel Torres's repair shop. The old machine had finally given out, probably from the gang's earlier sabotage. The small garage sat at the edge of town, its faded blue paint peeling in the Georgia heat. Miguel stepped out as she approached, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. His dark eyes took in the smoke rising from her tractor's engine. "Looks like trouble," he said quietly, already moving to inspect the damage. "Can you fix it?" Tanya asked, watching him probe the engine with experienced hands. Miguel nodded slowly, his fingers tracing the damaged parts. "Someone cut these fuel lines, made it look like normal wear." He glanced up at her. "Iron Fangs?" Tanya's jaw tightened. "You know about them?" "They went after my uncle's shop last year. Protection money." Miguel's voice stayed low, but anger flashed in his eyes. He couldn't pay. Had to close down. Working methodically, Miguel began removing damaged parts. "No charge for the work," he said firmly, when Tanya reached for her wallet. "Been wanting to help someone stand up to them? Just didn't know how." As Miguel worked, Martha Jenkins from the grocery store walked over from across the street. The older woman carried a paper bag of fresh bread and looked nervously over her shoulder before approaching. "Heard what they did to your barn," Martha said, keeping her voice down. "It's not right. They tried the same with my store last winter. Threatening notes, broken windows. Sheriff just called it vandalism." She pressed the bread into Tanya's hands. "Take it, and know you've got friends here." Ruth Daniels appeared next, parking her old station wagon behind the shop. Her son had been arrested on false drug charges 2 years ago. Everyone knew the sheriff had planted evidence after the boy witnessed something he shouldn't have. "They think they own this county," Ruth said, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "My boy's still serving 5 years for nothing. But people are scared to speak up." Tanya looked at the three of them. Miguel bent over the tractor, Martha nervously watching the street. Ruth with her fists clenched. All victims of the same corruption, all ready to fight back. "I have a plan," Tanya said carefully. "But I need eyes and ears. Information about their movements, their deals, their weak spots. Miguel straightened up, wiping grease from his hands. I fix their trucks sometimes. Could let you know when they're having mechanical troubles, when they're vulnerable. I hear everything in my store, Martha added. People talk, especially when they think no one's listening. Ruth nodded firmly. I know others who will help, quiet-like. We just needed someone to lead the way. Tanya lowered her voice, gathering them closer. First, we mapped their supply lines, their buyers, their sellers. Then we start disrupting them, one piece at a time. She pulled out a small notebook. Miguel, what do you know about their vehicles? For the next hour, they shared information. Miguel listed which trucks needed repairs soon. Martha detailed overheard conversations about drug drops. Ruth knew which deputies were on the gang's payroll. Tanya recorded everything, her military training helping her piece together a clearer picture of the Iron Fang's operation. It was bigger than she'd thought, but also more fragile. As Tanya pulled away from Miguel's shop, she noticed a mud-splattered pickup following her. The driver kept 3 car lengths back, trying to be subtle. She slowed down, pretending to check her phone, but the truck quickly turned onto a side street before she could make out its plate number. Later that night, Tanya stood in her bedroom, laying out dark clothes on her bed. The camouflage gear felt familiar in her hands, a ghost from her past life coming back to serve a new purpose. She checked her watch. 11:45 p.m. The gang's meth lab crew changed shifts at 2 a.m., according to Miguel's intel. Her mother knocked softly on the door. I know what you're planning, Darlene said, her voice tight with worry. Just come back safe. Tanya nodded, checking her backpack one last time. Inside were several homemade explosive devices, nothing military grade, but enough to do the job. She'd spent the afternoon carefully assembling them from supplies Martha had quietly gathered. At midnight, Tanya melted into the woods behind her property. The quarter moon cast just enough light to navigate by. Her boots made no sound on the damp earth, the ghost eye living up to her old call sign. The gang's lab was 3 miles deep in the forest, hidden in an old hunting cabin. She moved slowly, methodically, just like her reconnaissance missions overseas. Every few minutes, she'd stop and listen, letting the forest's rhythm tell her if anyone was nearby. An owl called. Crickets chirped. No human sounds yet. After an hour, she caught the first whiff of chemical stench. The lab's location was obvious to anyone who knew what to smell for, but the sheriff conveniently never investigated this part of the woods. Tanya crouched behind a fallen oak and surveyed the cabin. 2 guards outside, both armed with shotguns. One dozed in a lawn chair while the other paced, smoking. Through the dirty windows she could see 3 more men inside, working the cook. The night shift was always smaller, perfect for her plan. Tanya circled the property, moving like water between shadows. The guards never looked up as she slipped past them to the cabin's rear door. Inside, the cooks were too focused on their work to notice the whisper of movement in the dark corners. She placed the first charge behind a stack of chemical drums. The second went under the main workbench. The third, she secured to the cabin's support beam. Each device was set for 2:15 a.m., 15 minutes after shift change, when the night crew would be gone and the day crew wouldn't have arrived yet. A floorboard creaked under her foot. One of the cooks looked up, squinting into the shadows. Tanya froze, becoming one with the darkness. After a long moment, he shrugged and returned to his work. Backing out silently, she retrieved her backpack and began her careful retreat. The sleeping guard snored on. The smoker had wandered to the front of the cabin. No one had seen the ghost in their midst. From her observation point half a mile away, Tanya watched the night crew pack up and leave at 2 a.m. Their headlights disappeared down the dirt road, leaving the lab empty and quiet. At exactly 2:15 a.m., 3 sharp cracks split the night. Orange flames erupted from the cabin's windows. Secondary explosions followed as the chemicals caught fire, turning the lab into an inferno. The blast lit up the forest like daybreak. Tanya waited only long enough to ensure the fire would consume everything, then began her long walk home. Behind her, sirens wailed in the distance, too late to save anything. Dawn was breaking as she slipped in through her back door. The smell of coffee greeted her. Darlene was already up, waiting at the kitchen table with the morning paper. Her mother's hands shook slightly as she held up the front page. Mysterious explosion destroys abandoned cabin in Willow Creek Woods. Darlene read aloud. Local authorities suspect drug lab accident. She lowered the paper and looked at her daughter, who still wore her dark clothes and carried the faint scent of smoke. You're playing a dangerous game, baby. Tanya poured herself coffee, her movements precise and controlled despite the long night. Sometimes the most dangerous game is doing nothing, she replied quietly, remembering all the times she'd watched injustice happen from the sidelines. We can't let them win through our fear. Darlene nodded slowly, reaching across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. The morning sun streamed through their kitchen window, painting everything in soft gold. For a moment, they sat in silence. Mother and daughter, as somewhere in town, the Iron Fangs were discovering just how vulnerable they really were. Laura Whitfield sat at her desk at the County Chronicle, watching the View counter on her article tick steadily upward. Sheriff's Secret Ties, Following the Money Trail, had gone live at noon, and social media was already buzzing. Her phone hadn't stopped vibrating with notifications. The article laid out a damning web of evidence: suspicious bank transfers, mysterious property purchases, and testimonies from anonymous sources about cash deliveries to the sheriff's office. Laura had spent weeks piecing it together, cross-referencing property records and bank statements that Tanya's allies had helped her obtain. "Your story's trending," her editor called from across the newsroom. "State papers are picking it up. Sheriff Huxley's office keeps calling, demanding a retraction." Laura smiled grimly, remembering how the sheriff had brushed her off weeks ago when she'd asked for comment. "Let them call," she said, opening her email to find dozens of new tips flooding in. Across town, the Iron Fangs' usual hangout at the Rusty Nail Bar was eerily quiet. Through the grimy windows, Bo Strickland could be seen pacing, shouting into his phone. 2 of his men stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. At the grocery store, Martha Weber watched the drama unfold through social media feeds on her phone. When Tanya came in for supplies, Martha didn't hesitate this time. She loaded extra produce into Tanya's bags, no charge, and whispered the latest gossip about gang members fighting among themselves. "Heard Bo's brother caught 2 guys skimming money," Martha said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Had a big blow-up at the bar last night. They're scared, turning on each other." Tanya nodded, keeping her face neutral despite the satisfaction blooming in her chest. "Interesting," she said simply, but her eyes sparkled. As she loaded groceries into her truck, Miguel the mechanic pulled up beside her. He killed his engine and leaned out his window, speaking in low tones. "My cousin works at the gas station on Highway 20, he said. "Says the gang's been moving stuff out of their warehouse there, looking real nervous. Sheriff's been by twice today, yelling at Bo." "Thank you," Tanya said softly. "Keep your head down. Things might get messy." Throughout the afternoon, more allies emerged from the shadows. Ruth, whose son had been wrongly imprisoned, brought over a hot casserole and news about gang members selling their trucks and leaving town. Frank Mullins called to report suspicious vehicles heading toward the state line. The sheriff's office released a statement calling Laura's article baseless slander, but the damage was done. Social media exploded with locals sharing their own stories of corruption and intimidation. The hashtag #ChallenHuxleyGate started trending in regional circles. Tanya spent the day in her fields, tending her crops while watching the drama unfold through text messages and calls. The work felt different now. Each row she weeded, each plant she tended, was an act of defiance. This land would stay in her family's hands. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her fields, Tanya stood at the edge of her property. The evening air was thick with summer heat and the sweet smell of ripening vegetables. She could see the burn marks on her barn from here, a reminder of how this had all started. But now the tables were turning. The gang that had seemed so powerful just weeks ago was fracturing under pressure. The sheriff's intimidating presence had been exposed as corruption. And most importantly, the town's silence was breaking. A truck drove past her fence, and Tanya tensed instinctively. But instead of threats, the driver, one of the local teachers, honked and waved. Another car followed, its passenger giving a thumbs up. The light was fading to purple and gold when Laura's car pulled up to her gate. The journalist got out, holding a thick folder. "More people coming forward," Laura said, her eyes bright with purpose. "State investigators are interested. The FBI might get involved if the money laundering evidence holds up." Tanya nodded, looking out over her fields. The crops swayed gently in the evening breeze, corn stalks whispering, tomato vines heavy with fruit. This was what she'd fought for in the Marines, she realized. Not just abstract concepts of freedom and justice, but the right of people to live without fear, to work their land in peace. "We've got momentum now," Laura continued, following Tanya's gaze across the peaceful fields. "The gang's losing support. People are choosing sides, and they're choosing right this time." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Tanya felt the weight of her mother's legacy in the soil beneath her feet, the strength of her Marine training in her stance, and the power of growing community support in the air around her. For the first time since the threats began, victory felt not just possible, but inevitable. "Momentum," Tanya repeated softly, watching the last rays of sunlight gild her crops in golden light. Sometimes that's all you need to change everything. The sun had nearly set when Tanya heard the first fence post crack. She'd been working since dawn, replacing rotted wood and mending wire where the gang had cut through. Her muscles ached, but the repetitive work helped quiet her mind after days of mounting tension. The screech of tires shattered the evening calm. Tanya's head snapped up as 3 trucks roared down her driveway, kicking up clouds of red Georgia clay. Through the dust, she caught glimpses of masked figures in the truck beds. "Mama," she whispered, dropping her tools. The house was 100 yards away. Too far. The trucks skidded to a stop in a V formation, boxing her in. Men poured out with baseball bats and crowbars. Bo Strickland emerged last, a pistol glinting in his hand. "Should have taken the hint, girl," he drawled, leveling the gun at her chest. Tanya's combat training kicked in. 8 men total. 3 armed with guns, the rest with melee weapons. Multiple angles of attack. No clear escape route. "Where's that fighting spirit now?" Bo taunted, stepping closer. "Ain't so tough without your newspaper friends, are you?" A scream pierced the air from the house. Tanya's heart stopped. "Mama!" 2 more gang members dragged Darlene onto the porch. Her mother fought like a wildcat, kicking and clawing, but they were too strong. "Let her go!" Tanya took a step forward, but Bo's gun pressed against her ribs. He said. "You stay right there and watch." Darlene's eyes met Tanya's across the yard. "Baby, don't you dare give them anything. This land is ours." One of the men struck Darlene across the face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Something snapped inside Tanya. She moved without thinking, combat instincts surging. Her elbow shot up, knocking Bo's gun aside. Her knee drove into his groin. But before she could break free, 3 men tackled her from behind. A boot connected with her ribs. then another, and another. She curled into a ball, protecting her vital organs like she'd been trained. Through the pain, she heard her mother screaming her name. "Enough!" Bo wheezed, still doubled over. "Get the old lady in the truck. Make sure our girl here gets the message." Rough hands yanked Tanya's head up by her hair. Through swollen eyes, she watched them drag her mother toward the middle truck. Darlene never stopped fighting, never stopped calling Tanya's name. "Remember what happens to folks who don't cooperate," Bo said, pressing his phone to record. "Say something pretty for your daughter." "Tanya!" Darlene's voice was fierce despite her split lip. "Don't you give up. Don't you dare!" The truck door slammed, cutting off her words. Engines roared to life. "Choice is simple," Bo said, still recording. "Land for your mama. You got 24 hours to clear out, or—" He drew a finger across his throat. The trucks peeled out, spraying gravel. Tanya struggled to her feet, ribs screaming in protest. She stumbled forward, but the trucks were already disappearing down the road, taking her mother into darkness. Her phone buzzed 10 minutes later. The video appeared with a text. "Clock's ticking." Tanya replayed it, memorizing every detail. The truck's mud patterns, the men's builds, the way Bo favored his left leg. Her sniper's mind cataloged it all, building a mental map. Her allies arrived within the hour. Laura burst in first, followed by Miguel and Frank. Martha and Ruth came with ice packs and bandages. They found Tanya sitting at her kitchen table, the video playing on loop. "We need to call the state police," Laura insisted. "The FBI—" "They'll kill her before help arrives," Tanya said flatly. "Then give them the land," Martha pleaded. "Your life is worth more than—" "They won't let us live either way." Tanya's voice was cold steel. "They can't, now that we've exposed them." "You can't take on the whole gang alone," Miguel said. Tanya stood, ignoring the pain in her ribs. She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a long black case. The combination lock clicked open, revealing the gleaming rifle inside, a weapon she'd sworn never to use again after leaving the Marines. Her fingers traced the familiar metal. Through the scope of this gun, she'd protected villages in Afghanistan, eliminated high-value targets in Iraq. She'd earned the name Ghost Eye by becoming death itself, silent, invisible, precise. "I'm not alone," she said quietly. "I have all of you. And I have this." She sat in the darkness, the rifle across her lap, while her allies argued strategy around her. Their voices faded to background noise as combat clarity settled over her mind. She saw the mission with sniper's eyes now. Angles, distances, timing. The farm's topography unfolded in her memory like a tactical map. Her mother's words echoed, "Don't you dare give up." The rifle's weight was comfortable, familiar, like coming home to a terrible old friend. Dawn painted the Georgia pines in pale gold as Tanya's truck crawled along another back road. Her ribs throbbed with each bump, but she ignored the pain. She'd been searching since first light, checking every abandoned building and hidden spot she remembered from her surveillance. Nothing. The woods pressed close on both sides, branches scraping against her windows. Every shadow could be a hideout. Every turn could lead to her mother. But hour after hour yielded only empty cabins and forgotten barns. Tanya pulled over at a clearing to check her map again. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, and not from fatigue. The tremors came from somewhere deeper, a place she'd locked away years ago. The memories crashed through anyway. Afghanistan, a village in the Hindu Kush. She'd been providing overwatch for a squad extracting a high-value target. Everything had gone smooth until it hadn't. One mistake, a single missed signal, and half the team died in the ambush, including James, her spotter since basic. She'd watched it all through her scope. helpless to stop it. "Not this time," Tanya whispered, forcing her hands steady. "Not Mama." Her phone buzzed. Another taunting message from Beau, probably, but it was Miguel's name on the screen. "I found something," he said, without preamble. "Been checking modified trucks at every garage in 3 counties. One of their newer ones came through Hank's shop last week for custom work. Hank remembered them talking about meeting at the old Wallace sawmill." Tanya's heart jumped. The Wallace mill had shut down 5 years ago after a fire. It sat abandoned in dense woods 10 miles north, far from any main roads. "Perfect place to hide someone," she said. "That's not all," Miguel continued. "Hank said they ordered extra heavy suspension, like they were planning to haul something big, or planning to fortify a base." Tanya's tactical mind was already mapping approaches, angles, cover positions. "Miguel, I need you to do something else for me. But it's dangerous. Whatever you need. Drive by the mill. Act like you're lost. I need to know guard positions, vehicle numbers. But don't get close, and don't let them spot you watching. On it. Give me an hour." Tanya turned her truck toward home. The shaking in her hands was gone now, replaced by the familiar calm of mission planning. But as she drove, another memory surfaced. Not of combat, but of her mother. She was 12, watching Darlene face down the bank manager who'd tried to foreclose on their farm after Dad died. Her mother, all 5'4" of her, stood straight-backed and fierce. "This land paid for itself 3 times over," she'd said. "My grandfather's sweat is in this soil, my father's dreams, my husband's heart. You want it? Come and take it." They'd kept the farm. Now, 23 years later, Tanya heard the same steel in her mother's final words before they took her. "Don't you dare give up." She pulled into her driveway, mind clear and focused. The house was empty. She'd sent her allies away last night, knowing the danger of keeping them close. This was her fight now. Miguel called back as she reached her bedroom. 3 guards on rotation, he reported. 2 at the main gate, 1 roaming. 4 trucks parked outside. Looks like they're using the old office building. It's the only one with fresh tire tracks leading to it. Any signs of... Tanya couldn't finish the question. "The curtains are drawn, but I saw movement inside. Someone's definitely there." "Good work. Stay clear now. I'll handle the rest." She opened her gun safe, the combination as natural as breathing. Inside lay the pieces of her rifle, each wrapped in soft cloth. The Remington M24 had been her constant companion through 2 tours. She'd modified it herself, adjusting the trigger pull, customizing the stock to her frame. Each component slid into place with practiced precision. Barrel, receiver, bolt, scope. The familiar ritual steadied her further. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was a mission, like any other. Identify targets. Plan approach. Execute. Her fingers moved automatically, checking each connection, testing every movement. The scope's glass was still pristine. She'd maintained the weapon even after swearing never to use it again. Some habits couldn't be broken. Some skills stayed in the blood. The rifle came together like a deadly puzzle, becoming an extension of herself once more. She lifted it, feeling its perfect balance. Through the scope, the world narrowed to crisp, simple details. Distance, wind, trajectory. The weapon felt different from her old military days. Not because it had changed, she had. The young Marine who'd earned the name Ghost Eye had believed in clear missions and righteous causes. The woman she'd become knew the world held more shadows, more pain. But some things were still simple. They had her mother. That was all that mattered. She began laying out her combat gear. Camouflage, night vision, ammunition. Each piece checked and rechecked with mechanical precision. The memories tried to surface again, James's voice in her ear, the ambush, the helplessness. But she pushed them down. This time would be different. This time, she wasn't watching through a scope from half a mile away. This time, she was bringing the fight to them. The afternoon sun hung low as Tanya methodically loaded her truck. Each piece of equipment went into its designated spot, secured against movement. Her rifle, wrapped in a worn blanket, lay within easy reach beneath the seat. 3 backup magazines nestled in her vest pockets, each round hand-checked for imperfections. She spread the topographical map across her hood, marking distances and elevations with practiced precision. The Wallace sawmill sat in a shallow valley, with thick woods providing cover on 3 sides. The main access road curved in from the north, but she'd spotted 2 logging trails that could serve as alternate approaches. Wind indicators, strips of light fabric, fluttered from her side mirror. She'd been monitoring the patterns all day. The breeze held steady from the southwest, which would work in her favor for sound dampening. But weather reports showed a front moving in after midnight. She'd need to account for changing conditions. Her phone buzzed. Laura's text was brief. "Ready when you need me." Tanya typed back carefully. "Be at the North Ridge, 1 hour after sunset. Bring cameras. Stay in your car until you see my signal." She added the coordinates, then deleted the message thread. Laura's role was crucial. Whatever happened tonight needed documentation. The county had ignored too many disappearances, too many convenient accidents. This time, there would be evidence. She did another gear check, touching each item in sequence. Ceramic plates in her vest, tactical light with red filter, wire cutters, first aid kit, combat knife, extra batteries, water. Each piece tested and positioned for silent retrieval. The weight of the equipment felt familiar, bringing back memories of other missions, other nights spent studying terrain and planning infiltrations. But this was different. Those had been about following orders, serving a larger cause. This was personal. This was family. Her mother's face flashed through her mind. Not scared or helpless, but strong and determined, like always. Darlene had raised her alone after Dad died, working sunrise to sunset to keep the farm running. She'd taught Tanya that strength wasn't about muscle or weapons, but about standing your ground when life tried to push you down. "I'm coming, Mama," she whispered, tracing the route one final time. The sawmill's security was amateur work compared to what she'd faced overseas. 3 guards, predictable rotations, no proper perimeter control. They were thugs with guns, not soldiers. But that could make them more dangerous. Untrained men were unpredictable, more likely to panic and start shooting. She'd need to establish observation points first, confirm guard positions and movement patterns. The old lumber storage shed on the east side would give her a clear view of the main building. From there, she could mark approach lanes and identify the best entry point. Tanya checked her watch. 2 hours until sunset. Time to move. She drove back roads, taking a circuitous route to avoid attention. The truck's suspension, recently serviced by Miguel, rode silent and smooth. She kept her speed steady, matching other traffic. No reason to draw eyes. Half a mile from the sawmill, she pulled onto an overgrown logging track. Thick pines provided cover as she quickly applied camouflage paint to her face and neck. The familiar strokes helped focus her mind, shifting her into mission mode. The truck would stay here, hidden but accessible for a quick exit if needed. She gathered her gear with practiced efficiency, each movement calculated to minimize sound. The rifle's weight settled naturally against her shoulder as she secured the sling. Moving through the woods brought back more muscle memories. Her boots found solid ground between roots and fallen branches. Her body automatically adjusted to keep the rifle clear of vegetation. The skills were still there, buried, but not forgotten. She paused every 50 meters to listen and observe. Birds resumed normal patterns after she passed. No other human movement nearby. A deer watched her from thick brush, unalarmed by her careful progress. She was becoming part of the forest, just as she'd been trained. The first observation point gave her a clear view of the sawmill's eastern approach. Through her scope, she counted vehicles, 4 trucks, positioned for quick departure. The guard patterns matched Miguel's report. 2 men at the main gate, smoking and talking. A third patrolling the perimeter, more interested in his phone than his surroundings. She marked their positions on her mental map, noting sightlines and blind spots. The main building's windows were covered, but thin light leaked through gaps. Movement shadows suggested at least 5 people inside. Tanya worked her way around the perimeter, placing small markers at key points, reflective tape that would catch her tactical light but remain invisible to the naked eye. Each marker represented a decision point, a place where she'd need to choose between approaches based on guard positions. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and reds. Soon, darkness would provide better cover, but also make movement more challenging. She'd trained extensively in night operations, but so had her enemies in Afghanistan. These men hadn't, which gave her an advantage. She checked her watch again. Laura would be in position soon. The journalist's presence complicated things, added another factor to protect. But having witnesses could mean the difference between justice and another covered-up crime. The light faded quickly now, shadows lengthening across the sawmill yard. Guard shift change would come soon. Their most vulnerable moment. Tanya settled into her final position, checking sightlines one last time. A cool breeze carried the sharp scent of pine and distant wood smoke. She took one deep breath, then another, finding that calm center she'd relied on during countless missions. The forest grew darker around her as she began her final approach. The night wrapped around Tanya like a familiar blanket as she moved through the shadows. Her boots made no sound on the gravel, each step placed with deliberate care. Through her scope, she watched the 2 sentries at the main gate, their cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the darkness. The first guard never saw her coming. She emerged from the shadows behind him, one hand clamping over his mouth, while the other applied precise pressure to his carotid artery. He slumped silently, unconscious before he hit the ground. She dragged him into the deep shadows behind a stack of lumber, zip-tying his hands and feet. The second guard was looking at his phone, the blue light illuminating his face. Tanya waited until he turned away, then closed the distance in 3 swift steps. This one tried to cry out, but her hand was already across his mouth. He struggled harder than the first, but the outcome was the same. Soon he lay beside his companion, secured and hidden. Tanya checked her watch. 8 minutes since she'd started. She was ahead of schedule. The unconscious guards would be out for at least 30 minutes, plenty of time. Their weapons now lay unloaded in her pack, along with their phones and radios. The main building loomed ahead, its metal walls reflecting faint moonlight. She pressed herself against the cold surface, listening. Voices drifted through a gap in the wall. 3 men, maybe 4, talking about a poker game. But underneath that, she caught something else. The soft sound of someone humming. Her mother's voice, singing the same gospel tune she'd used to calm Tanya during childhood thunderstorms. Tanya's jaw clenched. Her mother was alive, and close. She moved along the wall until she reached a side door, testing the handle. Locked. The lock was simple, though, the kind found on any workshop door. Her pick tools made quick work of it. The door opened without a creak. Someone maintained the hinges well. Inside, darkness and the sharp smell of sawdust filled her nose. She waited, letting her eyes adjust. Shapes emerged from the gloom. Old machinery, stacks of lumber, empty oil drums. The voices were clearer now, coming from a lit office at the far end. She moved between the shadows of equipment, staying low. The humming grew louder. There, a storage room off to the side, light seeping under the door. A chair was wedged under the handle, a crude but effective lock. Tanya approached silently, years of training evident in every careful step. She lifted the chair away, set it down without a sound. The door handle turned smoothly under her hand. Darlene sat on a stack of pallets, hands bound but head held high. She stopped humming when she saw Tanya, eyes widening in recognition. Before she could speak, Tanya pressed a finger to her lips. The zip ties fell away under Tanya's knife. Darlene rubbed her wrists, then pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "Can you walk?" Tanya asked softly. Darlene nodded. "They didn't hurt me. Just scared me some." "Stay behind me. We're going—" The door burst open. Bo Strickland filled the frame, shotgun leveled at them. His face was red with rage and alcohol. "Should have known you'd try something stupid," he snarled. Tanya had already pushed her mother behind a stack of lumber. She faced Bo, hands raised but muscles coiled. "It's over, Bo. Let us walk out." "Like hell." He pumped the shotgun, the sound echoing in the small room. "You cost me my lab, my money. Now I'm gonna—" Tanya moved before he finished speaking. Her hand shot out, grabbing the barrel and twisting it up as his finger tightened on the trigger. The blast deafened them both, pellets punching holes in the ceiling. She stepped inside his guard, one foot hooking behind his knee while her elbow drove into his throat. Bo went down hard. The shotgun clattered away. Tanya had him in an arm lock, face pressed against the concrete floor. "Don't move," a new voice commanded. Sheriff Huxley stood in the doorway, service pistol aimed at Tanya's head. His badge caught the light as he stepped forward. "Let him up, Briggs. You're under arrest." "For what?" Tanya didn't release her hold. "Protecting my mother from kidnappers? Resisting arrest. Assaulting an officer. Breaking and entering." The sheriff's smile was cold. "I've got a whole list. And I've got witnesses," Tanya replied calmly. As if on cue, vehicle headlights swept across the windows. Multiple engines rumbled outside. Doors slammed. Voices called out. The sheriff's smile faltered. He moved to the window, keeping his gun trained on Tanya. His face went pale at what he saw. "That'll be the cameras," Darlene said, stepping out from her cover. "Lots of them, I expect. Amazing how fast news travels these days." Through the dusty windows, camera lights blazed like artificial stars. The sheriff's face twisted as he realized his predicament. His gun hand trembled slightly, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. "Turn those cameras off," he shouted, voice cracking. "This is a police matter." "Too late for that," Laura's voice carried through the open door. "We're streaming live to over 10,000 viewers right now. State police are already on their way." Bo struggled under Tanya's grip. "You're lying. Ain't nobody watching." Darlene stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "Young man, I can see at least 30 phones recording right now, and every single one of them caught you and the sheriff threatening us at gunpoint." The sheriff's composure cracked further. He moved to the window again, cursing under his breath as he saw the crowd. Miguel's truck blocked the main gate. Martha from the shop stood with her sons, phones raised. Ruth had brought half her church group. More vehicles were pulling up every minute. "Last chance," Tanya said calmly. "Put the gun down, Sheriff. You know how this ends." "Shut up!" The sheriff's face had gone from pale to red. "I run this county. You people don't tell me what to do." "Tell that to the FBI," Laura called out. "They're watching the stream, too. Got some interesting questions about your finances after my article?" Tanya felt Bo tense beneath her. "Don't do anything stupid," she warned him, applying slightly more pressure to his arm. "They're bluffing," Bo growled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Outside, engines roared. More headlights swept across the building as trucks and cars filled the sawmill yard. Voices rose, not just neighbors now, but people from all over the county. The sheriff's radio crackled with confused deputies asking about the gathering crowd. "You can't hold that pose forever," the sheriff said to Tanya, but his gun hand was shaking badly now. "I don't have to," Tanya replied. "Military training. I can keep him pinned for hours if needed. Question is, how long can you stand there pointing that gun at me while the whole world watches?" Darlene moved closer to the window, her voice carrying to the crowd outside. "Sheriff still got his weapon on my daughter, folks. Make sure you're getting this on video." The sheriff's radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't a deputy. "This is Special Agent Cooper, FBI. Sheriff Huxley, we have units inbound. Lower your weapon immediately." "They're lying!" Bo shouted, panic rising in his voice. "It's a trick." But the sheriff's face had gone ashen. He knew that voice. The same agent had questioned him last month about missing evidence in a drug case. Distant sirens wailed, growing closer. "It's over," Tanya said quietly. "Don't make it worse than it already is." The sheriff's gun wavered. Sweat ran down his face as he looked from Tanya to the windows, then back. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights started flashing against the sawmill's metal walls. "Alan!" Darlene's voice was surprisingly gentle, using the sheriff's first name. "You've known me 30 years. Is this really how you want to end your career? On video? Threatening a mother and daughter?" The sheriff's shoulders slumped. Slowly, he lowered his gun. "Kick it over here," Tanya ordered. He complied, the weapon sliding across the concrete floor. Bo exploded with rage. "You gutless coward!" He tried to buck Tanya off, but she simply shifted her weight and applied more pressure. He yelped in pain. The building's main doors burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear swarmed in, weapons raised. "Federal agents! Everyone freeze!" "In here!" Tanya called out. "I've got one restrained." Sheriffs surrendered his weapon. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Agents secured the room. The sheriff and Bo were cuffed and read their rights. Outside, more police units arrived. The crowd parted to let vehicles through but kept filming everything. Laura pushed through the agents, camera still rolling. "Sheriff Huxley, any comment on the kidnapping charges? Or the evidence of your involvement with the Iron Fangs gang?" The sheriff kept his head down as agents led him out. Bo was less quiet, cursing and threatening everyone in sight until they put him in a patrol car. Agent Cooper approached Tanya as she finally stood up, stretching her cramped muscles. "Ms. Briggs, we'll need statements from both you and your mother." "Of course," Tanya nodded. "But first," she turned to Darlene, who was already moving toward her. They met in a fierce embrace, holding each other tight as the chaos swirled around them. Darlene's shoulders shook slightly, the fear and tension of the past days finally releasing. "It's okay, Mama," Tanya whispered. "It's over now." Through the windows, they could see the sheriff's car pulling away, red and blue lights painting the night. The gathered crowd began to disperse, engines starting up, headlights cutting through the darkness as vehicles headed home. Spring brought new life to the Briggs farm. The rhythmic sounds of hammering and sawing filled the air as neighbors worked together to rebuild the burned-out barn. Miguel coordinated the construction crew, his expertise with machinery proving invaluable as they raised the frame. "Hand me that level," he called to Martha's oldest son, who was balancing on a beam. The teenager tossed it over with practiced ease. Tanya wiped sweat from her forehead, pausing her work on the roof trusses. Below, Ruth and her church group had set up tables laden with cold drinks and home-cooked meals. The aroma of fried chicken and fresh cornbread drifted up on the warm breeze. "Y'all come down and eat while it's hot," Ruth called out. Workers descended like hungry birds, gathering around the tables with grateful smiles. Darlene moved among them, refilling glasses of sweet tea. "Never thought I'd see the day," she said softly to Tanya as they sat together. "All these folks coming together like this." "Things change," Tanya replied, watching the diverse group of helpers. "Sometimes it just takes a push." The county courthouse had delivered that push 3 weeks ago. Bo Strickland and his gang received lengthy sentences for kidnapping, racketeering, and numerous other charges. Former Sheriff Huxley's trial had been even more satisfying, his corruption exposed for all to see. The judge ordered substantial restitution to the Briggs family and others the gang had terrorized. "Pass the potato salad," Frank Mullins called from across the table. The old veteran had surprised everyone by showing up with his tool belt that morning. "Ain't seen a barn raising like this since I was a boy." Laura, the journalist whose exposé had helped break the case, sat nearby taking notes. She'd been documenting the community's transformation. Her latest article highlighted how the county's first black female sheriff, a former state trooper named Angela Wilson, was reforming the department. "Sheriff Wilson stopped by earlier," Martha mentioned, settling onto the bench beside Tanya. "Said those new agricultural grants you applied for came through?" Tanya nodded. The federal money would help modernize their irrigation system and expand the greenhouse operation. Already, their spring crops were thriving. Local markets that had once shunned them now competed for their produce. "Speaking of the new sheriff," Miguel said, "she's asking if you'll serve on the community oversight board she's setting up." "I heard about that," Ruth added. "We need good people watching out for everyone's interests." Tanya considered it as she ate. She'd been reluctant to take on any public role, preferring to focus on the farm. But lately, more folks had been coming to her for advice or help with local issues. They trusted her judgment, respected her quiet strength. "Mama," she glanced at Darlene, "what do you think?" Darlene smiled knowingly. "I think you've always been a leader, baby. Just took others a while to see it." After lunch, work resumed with renewed energy. By sunset, the barn's skeleton stood complete against the pink-orange sky. Miguel's crew would return tomorrow to start on the walls and roof panels. Tanya stood in the doorway of the new structure, breathing in the fresh-cut lumber smell. Beyond the barn, their fields stretched green and promising toward the horizon. The spring wheat was coming up strong, and the vegetable beds were bursting with new growth. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Frank appeared beside her, gazing at the frame. "You know, when I first told you to stand your ground, I wasn't sure how it would end. But you did right by this land. By all of us." "We all did right," Tanya corrected him. "Couldn't have managed alone." As the workers packed up for the day, Tanya and Darlene moved to their favorite spot, the front porch of the farmhouse. The evening air was sweet with honeysuckle as they settled into the rocking chairs, glasses of tea in hand. Above them, mounted on the wall, Tanya's rifle caught the last rays of sunlight. She'd cleaned and mounted it there after the sawmill incident, not as a threat or warning, but as a reminder of strength found in adversity, of justice hard won, of a community finally united. "Remember what Daddy used to say about this land?" Darlene asked, rocking gently. "It's not just soil and crops," Tanya quoted. "It's our history, our future, our freedom. He'd be proud of how you protected it." Darlene reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "We all are." They sat in comfortable silence as twilight settled over the farm. In the distance, crickets began their evening chorus. A whip-poor-will called from the edge of the woods. The land felt peaceful, secure, not just for them, but for everyone who had stood together against hatred and corruption. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends. and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.